Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Looks a little bit different because we have a special guest today who is a long friend of mine. I've known you since
1980.
80s, probably.
Middle of the 80s,
Yeah, known Sam a long time, but he is also no stranger to Hickory Flat because he used to be here on staff, so youth pastor, associate pastor. And so he's here filling in for Nick, and we'll catch up on all that in a second, but let's get going, okay? All right, so Sam, thanks for being here.
Thanks very much.
And let me just catch people up. If you didn't know, Nick Yother has been in the hospital. He is now home. He had something called cellulitis, or has something called cellulitis, which is kind of an infectious disease. I think he got it from a wound in the lake kind of thing. But he's been a pretty sick boy, and he's making good recovery and expected to make a full recovery and be back soon. But in the meantime, I'm so thankful that my good friend Sam was able to fill in with us. And, as I say, Sam and I have been friends for a long time. And tell us where you are. I think everybody that's watching this probably knows, but give us a catch up on Sam.
When I left Hickory Flat, I was appointed as they called it assistant director to the Congregational Excellence, but I was the youth ministry person for the conference.
Right.
And I was a resource person for North Georgia, which meant I consulted with churches on youth ministry and helped to plan the youth retreats and anything that had to do with youth ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of years ago, I went to Milledgeville after that position got moved down, that conference position got moved down to very part-time. I was appointed to a church as a pastor at Milledgeville,
Mm-hmm.
at Hopewell United Methodist Church. Kathy, my wife and family, they stayed up here
Mm-hmm.
because when we got there, we realized that the church there in Milledgeville was looking at possibly voting to leave, to disaffiliate. And it's like, we're not going to sell the house and Kathy quit her job and move down there and have to move back in a year.
Yeah.
So she kept her house, we kept the house. And I stayed down there in the parsonage and drove back and forth every so often, about once a week. But then after a while, I got to where I realized I can't keep doing that. I've got to be back with my family. So I called my DS on a trip down after yelling a little bit and screaming a bit on the way down.
Yeah.
I said, I really would like to move back close to home.
Yeah.
So I'm now back at Birmingham United Methodist Church, which you're very familiar with.
Which is another connection because Sam and his wife Kathy, his family, his kids were there, were members there at one time.
And I was on conference staff. I had to do something weird. I had to find my own church, which I'd never done before.
And you came to my church.
I did.
Yeah. Well,
we felt very welcome there.
Yeah.
So that was good.
So I'm thankful that you did that, and so you've watched this before, and I have no expectation you've watched the sermon, and so we probably haven't had a chance to.
I have not,
but that's okay. And I think we're talking about started this sermon series 2 weeks ago on the book of Proverbs, which I realized I might have referred to Proverbs, as sort of a secondary source at times in my preaching, but I never really had done a sermon series on Proverbs. And it's about wisdom, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a time where people, I think,
people decide they're going to try some other than wisdom.
Right. Or they're getting their wisdom from other sources, And so I'm using that as the primary source, even though, particularly this week, I brought in some, the gospel and some James a little bit. And so this past week, though, James, it turns out, has a lot to say about anger and anger management. And so I was thinking about that after I talked to you and invited you, just like, you were like, of course, Nick Yother would be the same way. I don't know that I've ever seen you mad or angry. I don't know that I've ever seen Nick Yother angry or mad. So what's your secret, man?
I've definitely been angry, but I would say that to a fault, I probably hide that too much.
Yeah.
Don't feel confident expressing it as I feel like I want to.
Yeah.
So,
well, I use the example on Sunday that some people might be like me, because I remember sitting with a counselor one time and he was basically saying I was angry And I think I said something to the effect of, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed, or I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated, or something like that. And so I think sometimes people, but I have definitely gotten angry. Yeah. And that's part of my point. When you respond out of anger, some of the most embarrassing, most self-defeating, humiliating things comes when we've responded in some way out of anger. And so how do we find a better way around that? But I guess the starting point, and I want to get your observation on this too, that I had this image of a boiling kettle. And I made the statement that the last like 5 to 7 years, it seems like everywhere I go, I see so much of that people are just underneath the boiling point. And it takes just a little bit. Have you noticed that?
And in some ways it feels like, I don't know, maybe that they enjoy seeing it boil over every now and then, or they like to keep it right on the edge of that so that.
Yeah, that's where the wisdom comes in. I think we've gotten sort of permission to get angry now, and that be a valid thing. And I've actually had used that. Well, they were angry. And so that excuses the behavior. Yeah, they were angry. They had a point, but they were angry. But the way I read the Bible, that's not such a good thing. And I know there is righteous anger.
And I think I do think that, anger is an emotion.
Yeah,
it's a feeling. And I learned a long time ago, I can't just decide I'm not going to have a certain emotion.
Right.
However, what I do with that, I can decide.
Right.
So I guess when I get to discussions with people about anger and they say, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be angry over this. And I'm like, well, you can't help what you're feeling.
Right.
But I want you to acknowledge that you're feeling anger and figure out a healthy way of.
Right. Anger is a human knowledge. It gets called anger a lot in the scripture.
Yeah.
But I think you can always point in the subtext to some other reason for the anger.
Right.
Just as a good counselor or a social psychologist will tell us that anger is a secondary emotion. And so for me to say I'm frustrated or I'm disappointed, or a child to say, the child may just be hungry or tired. For us too, we can be hungry and tired. Yeah.
Yes.
And so it is being able to name what is really going on.
That's a really good point. A lot of times I have found when people are angry with me and it doesn't seem warranted, it's like, why did you blow up like that?
Mm-hmm.
Asking a question like, what's really going on?
What is really going on? I use the James text. I think it's James 4, and he talks about what causes the quarrels and dissensions. It's the desires that wage within you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a way of restating that is we're not getting what we want.
Yeah.
And so what is it that are we not getting, and going back, one other thing about anger, there is flight or fight. So there is that portion of anger that's really, a healthy thing. The way we're designed, but it's when we linger in that anger or let it manifest us in ways that causes broken relationships and stuff. So see a lot of that these days, right?
I'll say. Yeah. And the destruction that it can bring right.
It's hard to undo.
So
it's hard.
Yeah. It's hard to take back what you've said and what you've broken.
Yeah. So before I get into a couple of points that I made on Sunday, and they were just two, and there's many more, and we just kind of scrape the surface a little bit. Let me ask you, what strategies have you had in your life, maybe in your ministry, but maybe even in your relationships? What sort of anger management strategies have you seen as effective?
Getting married.
Yeah.
Meaning that, and in some ways I'm a little serious. That was not a strategy that I had, but I would say one of the things that helps me with my anger is my relationship with my wife.
Okay.
Somebody who understands me a lot better, can tell when there's something going on, and can kind of tap me and you need to cool it on that, or do you need to take a break or something?
She knows you better than anybody else.
She knows me, and that helps a lot. But I would say, as far as a conscious strategy, prayer, definitely. Being in touch, knowing that God even knows me better than anybody else does.
Right.
And when I'm feeling off, even before it gets to anger, if it's fear, if it's something very basic like hunger, but if it's something that I'm wanting, being in prayer about that thing that's bugging me, I think helps even before it moves to anger.
Right. Giving it over to God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or listening, giving it over to God. I'm not real good at. I try give it over to God, and then I sometimes pick it back up and look at it again. But I think that giving it over to God, but also just talking about it with God, and asking, and why do I feel this way about this thing? Why is this bothering me so much? This way that this person that I don't even know responded to me. That makes me angry. When somebody yells something at me that doesn't even know me and they call me some name, I'm like, you don't even know me. Why? And then I get mad that I am mad.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of that fight or flight thing that kicks in. Like, that definitely would be. I mean, I've had church members who have come at me with something, with a $2 problem that got had like a $20 response. Am I saying that right? Yeah. But I mean, it was like, this is just a little thing we can solve. But just, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And so, but my initial response is to back up, right? I mean, because no one wants to be treated that way. And then it doesn't really help with reconciling it at all.
Right.
When we're doing that. So, that's finding a wiser way to do that, even though that will happen. But I was also saying in traffic, I think because we have all this other pent up stuff, one of the things that will get me is seeing somebody just driving erratically and crazy and dangerously in traffic, so that like I'm in the passing lane about to pass somebody, and here comes somebody swooping over in the other lane and cuts in between us. I want to like floor it and like.
Yes. Yeah. I have to be careful when I'm driving if I get angry.
And so, one of the points that I made is that like I've driven on 575 before. This should not be a surprise to me. Why am I so outraged that this thing happened?
Surprised.
People drive erratically on the interstate. And so I think a part of that is, kind of back up to just realize that there's a certain human quality that's out there in the imperfections that, it doesn't dismiss it and say that it was okay and that it wasn't wrong, but it's also I think it helped me with, at least with my initial response, was going like, okay, hey, it's okay.
I mean, I think even faith-wise, we get into anger when we try to do what's right and we see someone else willfully doing what they and we know is wrong.
Yeah.
And it can make us angry, which is a way, Paul would say, that's a way that sin is just moving right in on you trying to do what's right, and it's still taking over. And I think a lot of times even the quote righteous can end up getting angry when they see someone else.
Well, that quote gets pulled out a lot, but what they don't do is go to the end of it. It says, it talks about righteous anger. I can't quote it. I'm sorry, I should have written it down. But the end of the quote says, "Don't let the sun go down on your anger."
Yeah.
And so,
Malone Dodson, and you probably have heard him do this.
Oh, yeah.
When he would do a wedding at Roswell Methodist, at the end of the wedding, or at the end of the ceremony, as he was talking to the couple, he would always, I never saw him miss this, but he would always advise them, don't go to sleep angry.
Right.
And I remember as a young, probably freshman in college, hearing that for the first time and thinking, that's good advice.
Yeah. Get to some point where you've at least decided this relationship is important, and you've said that to each other. And, we need to, when we're calmer, we need to sit down and talk about this, and we will get through this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is very good advice. Yeah.
It is a topic I like to cover in my premarital counseling, talking with couples, and how do you two respond to anger? And it's interesting how the different ways people do. Some of them want to deal with it right away. this is bothering me. We've got to talk about it. Others want to, well, give me some time. I need to step back. And the hard part comes when you don't realize how the other person processes anger.
Right.
And you think that they should do it the same way.
There's good communication.
Yeah.
I mean, and having, those are all learned skills. I don't know, some people pick them up naturally, but I think there are some communication tactics that we can use to realize, just kind of in self-awareness, how to communicate with another person, particularly somebody that we're intimate with, that we're, close to. And that was one of my points on Sunday, was that, when we're in those kind of relationships where there has been stress, to use a lot of I statements and not you statements.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You must have been some of the same training I've had with
sure
premarital counseling.
Yeah.
I wish you would do this. I would like it if this happened, instead of you never do this, or you always say this. You statements become accusatory.
Yeah.
And they're also the type of statements that a person would easily argue with.
Yeah.
Well, no, I don't always do that.
Yeah.
But if I were to say, I wish you would do that.
Yeah. You watched Ted Lasso?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
But I went on to Ted Lasso late.
Yeah.
So I made a lot of people really just.
So there's a lot of stuff about relationships in that are ways of doing things healthy. There's examples of unhealthy things, but when he has his wife starts dating their therapist after they divorced, but she starts dating. So when he confronts her with it, I just that was like a clinic in how you use I statements. It was clear he was upset. He said, he was like, I wish we had talked about this.
Yeah.
We have to raise this child together.
Mm-hmm.
I love that little boy, and it upset me, and I wish that we had talked about it.
It was almost like he had talked to his
counselor
right before, which kind of had.
But there's, you pick up things. One of the theme scriptures has been that wisdom shouts out from the streets. That's in Proverbs 1. And I do think there's a lot of life that we can gain wisdom from if we're willing to pay attention to the life lessons that are all around us. And so, the question that I ask myself, ask the congregation, ask you too, how has that worked out for you? How has losing it and getting angry? Because for me, it hadn't worked out real well. And so I should be able to pick up these lessons. It's this is not a good strategy to blow up in a meeting and get mad. That's not helping anything, So,
Other than it lifts the lid off the boiling pot and allows stuff to escape. But that...
For a second. There's other ways.
And then it makes a huge mess.
Well, there's more to clean up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's almost irreparable, what the damage that you can cause in a moment. Particularly, I think we as pastors,
how a person who is struggling with that, who tends to take the lid off way too often and let things boil, how does that type of person rein in?
I think you hit it, a point that I didn't make on Sunday, and I should have, where you started with prayer. I think we have to acknowledge our relationships with God and
others.
And take a beat.
Yeah, I think so. Being real with God about it, and approaching that is a great first step.
Yeah, I think and then beyond that, I think to develop some strategies when that happens. The anger management thing.
Well, and really, and I'm saying that meaning that for me, prayer is more than just telling God, I'm really mad about this, or I need to get a handle on this, and then amen, and then going on, and then saying, well, how come God's never fixed that in me? Prayer is a conversation, so I need to also spend some time listening.
Right.
And I don't think we do that enough with prayer.
Sure.
And so bringing something like that before God and a struggle with it, or a recognition that something's off and I need to figure this out before it gets out of hand, and then quietly sitting and listening and waiting for thoughts and images and ideas, which may not come that first time. It may be after a few times that I talk about that and lift it up to God. But
and then you may fall. I mean,
right.
Maybe you might go years and something happens and there's this right combination of, blood chemistry and atmospheric pressure and something else has happened that day that makes you do something that, you later regret. And God forgives, and people generally will too. That's why, it comes down as to, I came up with 2 points for this sermon, and they're not very sophisticated. I'm a pretty simple guy. I didn't really wordsmith them a lot, but I just thought they might be easy to remember. Just 2 points, two takeaways. One about anger is that we shouldn't trust our anger.
That's good.
Because I think it kind of leans into a little bit what you're saying, that people seem to do that now and almost have permission to do that now. And I just don't think you should trust your anger. I don't think you're being clear-headed. I don't think it helps us be consistent or compassionate when we're angry.
There are some people who go out of the way to try to be angry.
Right.
They see that seems to be effective.
It got a response. It's just like a child pitching a tantrum.
Yeah.
But I just think it causes harm. And so to not trust our anger. I used a People's Court example. I saw this People's Court where, the guy comes out, the plaintiff comes out, and he says, the plaintiff is suing Jeff, the owner of Jeff's Pizza Parlor, for $1,500 after he and his family of 7 got food poisoning at the defendant's pizzeria.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm watching this going like, okay, they got sick, all 7 of them. Clearly, why are we even having this case? And so then the other guy comes out and he says, and you find out that it's his brother, and he has sued him like 20 other times. They've been suing him his whole life. And, he's never even been to the pizza place. And so that was another thing. So, since we're doing Proverbs, there's a proverb that said, the first to testify seems true until the other person speaks, And so, yeah, it is. And so we hear something and it makes us angry. We see something posted, and it may be a half-truth. It may be an untruth. Maybe it could even be a truth, but it's been designed in such a way to punch a button.
Yeah.
And we go off, and make decisions based without knowing the other side.
There are people whose jobs it is to figure out how to push those buttons.
On Facebook, or Instagram. Or
politicians.
Yeah, politicians,
Basically, what can we do to get everybody else all upset about this?
Yeah. Yeah, we live in this kind of period of outrage, and I just don't think, as I read the Bible, that's what God has in mind. As I read Proverbs, I just don't think it's a very wise way to live.
Yeah.
So
if the one that has every right to be angry with us, God, I've often asked, how do you put up with it?
Right?
How do you not get so angry that you don't just destroy us?
Right.
And he's promised not to. So
well, James speaks a lot about wisdom. My other text I was pulling from was James, and he talks about who is wise among us, and then he talks about humility. And I think that one of the keys to overcoming anger is to lean into that humility. And who was more humble than Christ?
Yeah.
Right. Who though himself was equal with God,
emptied himself
and became a human being for our account. And so
as a servant.
Yeah. But some practical things I think to come away with it is that we will get angry, even though we maybe could learn not to trust our anger. We are going to get angry, and so we need to. The second point was we need to forgive people.
Good.
We need to forgive people.
Yeah.
We need to not trust our anger, and we need to forgive people. Because none of us are perfect, and people are going to do things that are going to hurt us and injure us, and we just can't stay angry. We just got to learn to forgive. And then, it's easy. It's a very easy thing to say and a very hard thing to do, because I know some people have been hurt very unfairly and unjustly.
Definitely.
But I think to move on in this world and to be God's kingdom people, then we need to learn to be able to forgive as we've been forgiven.
Yeah.
And we may not get everything we want, and we may not get everything that we even deserve, but sometimes that's a good thing too.
I was going to say, glad I don't get everything I deserve.
Yeah. So we'll get down great. Well, Sam, thank you for being here. We'll do it again sometime, and I think we're finally kind of moving on, trying to do some things with the churches sort of here in this area. We have a lot that we share in common, including people that have been on staff at both churches, and but a lot of friendships that go both ways. And y'all seen your pastor Mike Morgan. His parents were in my last church.
That's right.
So it just becomes this really weird kind of world.
Part of the United Methodist system is everybody. There's all different connections.
We need to lean into that probably more than ever.
I think we need to look at it as a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for being here. God bless you. God bless your ministry, and we'll see you real soon.
Thanks, Dave.
And folks, continue to pray for Nick. If you've got comments on this, you can put them in the comments section. We appreciate you watching or listening every week, and we'll be back next week in some form. Maybe Nick will be back. Maybe we'll get Sam or somebody else to sit in. But we pray for Nick and just wish him a speedy recovery. And God bless everybody.